You've probably heard it a million times, right? The economy is just too complicated for the average person. It's for experts. Well, we're here today to tell you that's just not true. We're going to break down how the whole thing really works in a way that actually makes sense. And you'll see that at its heart, it's simpler than you think. Okay, so let's jump right in. Forget all the complicated charts and the crazy jargon for a second. The entire global economy, this massive complex machine, it's all built on one single, incredibly simple idea. That's it. That's the foundation of everything. You buying coffee, a car company buying steel, the government paving a road, every single one of those is just a transaction. The economy is nothing more than the grand total of all the transactions happening all the time. A buyer trades money for something, a product, a service, from a seller. That's the engine that makes the world go round.
So who's making all these transactions? Well, there are really just four big players in this game. First, there are people, like you and me. Then you've got companies, the bakery, the car maker, you name it. Then there's the central government, which is the biggest buyer and seller of them all, collecting taxes and spending it. And finally, the central bank, which has the most important job. It controls the money supply itself.
Now, when we say money, it's not just the bills in your pocket. The central bank sees it in layers. You've got M1, which is physical cash and deposits. Then it goes all the way up to M4, which includes things like public bonds. The total for Brazil is around $14.8 trillion. And here's the absolute key. Whenever the amount of this money grows faster than the amount of actual stuff being produced, that, my friends, is how you get inflation.
And believe me, this isn't some new, modern problem. To really understand what happens when you mess with the value of money, we have to take a trip back in time. Let's look at an amazing cautionary tale from the Roman Empire.
So, picture this. It's 64 AD, and Emperor Nero, well, he liked to spend a lot. But his money, the denarius, was made of real silver. So he got this great idea. What if he just took a little silver out of each coin? He dropped it from about 98% to 93%. That way, he could make more coins with the same amount of silver. And it worked so well that other emperors kept doing it. Marcus Aurelius, Commodus. By the time Caracalla was in charge, the coins were only half silver.
So what happens when you flood the market with all these new, watered-down coins? It's simple, really. The value of every single coin tanks. If one coin used to buy you 3 apples, now suddenly it can only buy you 1. That right there is inflation 101. More money chasing the same amount of stuff. It just destroys your purchasing power.
By 301 AD, things were a complete mess, so Emperor Diocletian decided to fix it. With brute force, he passed a law that basically said, if you're a merchant and you sell your stuff for more than my official price list, you will be executed. Seriously.
And what happened next is the perfect lesson in unintended consequences. Think about it. If you were a merchant, would you sell your goods at a loss or just not sell them? Exactly. They stopped selling. They hid their products. This led to massive shortages, which led to scarcity, famine, and misery. The attempt to control prices didn't just fail, it completely broke the Roman economy.
Now, that story from Rome is so important because the exact same forces are at work today. We don't shave silver off coins anymore, but central banks have much more sophisticated tools to manage the money supply, and how they use those tools is what creates these predictable, repeating economic cycles.
It really comes down to a constant push and pull between two different approaches. On one side, you have a contractionary policy. The goal here is simple: stop inflation. The tool? They raise interest rates. That makes money expensive to borrow, so people spend less. On the other side, you have an expansionary policy. The goal is to get the economy moving. The tool? They lower interest rates, making credit super cheap to encourage everyone to borrow and spend. And these two policies create a loop that just goes around and around. Let's walk through it. It starts with low interest rates. Credit is cheap, so people and companies borrow and spend like crazy. All that spending pushes demand up, which pushes prices up. That's inflation. The central bank sees this, and they step on the brakes by raising interest rates. All of a sudden, borrowing is expensive, spending slows way down, the economy cools off, inflation is under control, and what do you think they do next? They lower interest rates to get things going again, and the cycle repeats.
Okay, so let's take this idea of cycles and apply it to a real-world example right now, Brazil's financial situation. Because this is where you really see the consequences of these policies, especially when it comes to government debt.
So if you just look at the numbers, you can see a clear trend over the past few years, and this is across different governments.
The country's total debt has been growing faster than its GDP. That's the total value of everything we produce.
To put that number in perspective, Brazil's national debt is now equal to 77% of the entire country's economic output for one whole year. That is a massive number. But the size of the debt is only half the story. The other, maybe even more important part is how much it costs to carry that debt. Brazil pays about 6% of its entire GDP just on interest payments. Now compare that to other countries that usually pay somewhere between 1 and 3%. It's a huge difference.
And this is what creates a really dangerous trap. The more a country owes, the riskier it looks to investors. So to loan that country money, they demand higher interest rates. But paying higher interest means the debt grows even faster, which makes it look even riskier. It's a vicious circle that's incredibly hard to break.
Look, hearing all this can feel a bit heavy. I get it. But here's the most important thing I want you to take away today. Once you understand this system, the transactions, the history, the cycles, you don't have to be a victim of it anymore. You can actually choose to be a protagonist.
So the real question isn't if these cycles are going to happen. They will. The real question is, now that you know the rules of the game, how can you use this knowledge to your advantage, to protect yourself, and maybe even to thrive?
You know, an informed investor has a pretty simple playbook. First, they figure out where we are in the economic cycle. Are things heating up or cooling down? Second, they understand what the central bank is doing about it. Are they hitting the gas or slamming on the brakes? And third, based on that, they position their investments to benefit from what's inevitably coming next.
So I'll just leave you with this one last thought. The next cycle is already on its way. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. Now that you see how the machine works, are you going to let it run you over? Or are you going to see it as an opportunity? The choice, really, is yours.